I just said that you've been living in Narva, but I cannot remember for how long. I've been living in Narva city for 51 years, of which 2 years I spent in the military. So please, the floor is yours. So I'll be trying to moderate a discussion, not so much of a debate, but a discussion about how immigrants could have any effect on Estonian language and culture. So should we do something to protect the Estonian language and culture from immigration? And what to do with the dominance of English in Estonian universities. So as an introduction, I work in Narva. I've been also born there. And it's a city that was developed and started by immigrants. My parents are also immigrants from Russia. I'm the first generation Narva person, and because of that, I'm bilingual. I work in 2 languages. I think it's a bonus, probably. As a downside, if I refer to a good acquaintance of mine, a teacher of Estonian language, he said after living in Narva for a while that he doesn't want to do it anymore. He wants to move away from Narva to give his children the things they lack, they said. And he said that even the folk dances danced in Narva that are Estonian aren't really properly Estonian. That was his experience. So if the number of immigrants rises, how it will impact the culture, this is something that politicians will have to think about. And now we'll check if everybody is here. Daniel Kõiv from Estonia 200. Please, the floor is yours. Urmas Espenberg from Estonian Conservative People's Party. Tõnis Lukas from Estonian Pro-Patria and Respublika Party. Vladimir Svet from Estonian Center Party. Maris Lauri from the Reform Party. And Jaak Juske from the Social Democrats. So we'll have to deal with 2 topics. And we'll also leave about 10 minutes for discussion, for questions from the audience. Now, the first topic. We have more and more languages spoken in Estonia due to immigration. We are used to Russians, but now we have refugees, IT specialists, families, builders from ex-Soviet republics. So there's a question, what should the Estonian government do in order to preserve Estonian culture and language? But I looked at the figures. The yearly annual book of Citizenship Board said that, yes, immigration is rising, but it's temporarily rising. And 30,000 temporary employment permits were given, about 2,000 families, and about a bit more than 5,000 foreign students. So you don't see big masses of people immigrating to Estonia. Do you see immigration as a threat to Estonian language and culture at the moment and in the future? Daniel Kõiv. Thank you for the question. Speaking of immigration, we can speak about legal and illegal immigration. We are speaking about immigration in a broader sense. If you want to speak about legal immigration, then do it. Speaking of legal immigration to Estonia, I don't see a big problem here. It doesn't have a large scale. The conference here has been speaking about multilingualism and the richness, diversity it provides to us. If we think that Estonia would be monolingual, Estonians would be monolingual, Russians would be monolingual living in Estonia, the Ukrainians living here would be monolingual, then there wouldn't be any shared language between us and no common ground. I think that the richer and the broader the cultural heritage is, the better. So no threat, no need to protect. Urmas, what do you think? I wouldn't over-dramatize the situation. I'm not dramatizing. The figures are quite low, actually. So what do you think? So, in short, the efficiency of integration is dependent on the number of immigrants, for example. There are no theoretical schemes that could replace practice. The life is always more diverse than logics or theory. There are some nuances in life that are added. So immigration doesn't endanger Estonian language and culture. There is a danger towards Estonian culture. What is the danger about? So we have low capacity of integration. That is the problem. And as you said earlier, we have a Russian minority group here. We haven't been successful in integrating them and providing good Estonian education to them, so that's a problem. Tõnis Lukas. Now that we see immigration growing, slowly but still, what should we do to ensure the sustainability of Estonian language and culture? And is there a threat to that? Can you hear me? We have experience that Estonia is one of the most international countries in Europe. And there are a lot of people who have come to live here from abroad. We cannot compare it to Sweden, Germany, France. So we have a kind of ability to resist or an expectation about how to get by in a multinational country. I think languages aren't just to have, in order to debate things. Debates are also, of course, interesting things, but I think the way that activities are organized in the society, it all requires people to communicate between each other. And in Estonia, this official language is Estonian. Now, the threats of new migration waves, it is a threat if we leave our primary aims. And our primary constitutional aim is to do all the bureaucracy in Estonian. If we leave that aim behind, then we will have a problem. We won't have good integration. Let's say we have Ukrainian builders who come here with their families and integrate in the segregated educational system and manage without Estonian, and they are let to do it. Or some people get by here with English alone, and they are allowed to do it. And then Russian-speaking and English-speaking people will start to speak between themselves in English, and Estonian will be left aside. Then that's a threat. If we have a strong country, then there's no threat. But if we don't notice these kinds of changes, and if we don't stick to the presumption that Estonian is our joint shared language, if we leave that, then there will be threats. Now, the next speaker, what do you think? Is there a threat to Estonian language and culture? I think there's the danger of losing a great opportunity that the present migration could offer to Estonia. Looking at how many Russians or Ukrainians there are around the world, and how many of them end up in Estonia, then actually these numbers are very small. And the country and the people should be smart enough in order to use the opportunities that these people are here, to make these people fall in love with Estonia, with Estonian language and culture. We probably all of us know that in order to fall in love, you need not know this person thoroughly. You don't need to have long-term trust or live together for a long time. Falling in love is a very subjective thing. And if we organize it so that people fall in love in Estonia, then it's a good thing. A question, has the Estonian novel Right and Justice been translated into Ukrainian? No. Let's do it. Let's translate this important novel into Ukrainian, even some abstracts, so that the people who came here and live, they will take a part of Estonian with them. I think it's a opportunity that we are not using right now. Now, about translating this novel, would we improve the quality or quantity of immigration with that? I think quality will be forwarded into quantity here. Ukrainians will start to speak, this is the country of Anton Hansen Tammsaare, the author of this Right and Justice novel, that let's go and travel to Estonia. But the question is not about this specific novel exactly, but the question is about if the people who come here on a temporary basis, if they see something here they would like to take along with them, they'd like to come, money, but maybe also the working culture. Could this be attractive to them? Maybe the way people, the attitude of Estonians to the legal country institutions, the way to the rule of law, the way our attitude to neighbors, and so on. Maris Lauri, do you see immigration as a threat to Estonian language and culture now and in the future? Not at the moment. However, in the future, we could have a shift of balance here. For sure, there are changes taking place in the world that could make large masses of people to delocate. We're speaking about wars and bigger conflicts and so on. And if it happens, then it's important to look at things that we don't manage that well at the moment. So it was mentioned that there are people coming here on a temporary basis or for a bit longer time. There's the question of whether their children will go to an Estonian-speaking school. If they come to study at the university here for a couple of years, then it would be great if it would be natural if they would also take courses of Estonian. I'm not sure how much they would learn, but it would be good to get the basic level at least. And we Estonians tend to be very flexible. So we often lack confidence. If Tõnis Lukas said that the government should assert itself, but I think people should assert themselves individually and be proud for their language. Often we say, Estonian is so complex. But if we start to learn another language, another foreign language, then they are also very challenging for us at the beginning. Why should we leave the impression already at the beginning that it's very complicated and challenging, and then we'd be surprised that nobody wants to learn this challenging language? Everybody's frightening them, and now we are just making concessions here. But for example, Finns manage. There are not so many big differences between Finnish and Estonian grammar and syntax. But I think we need a bit more inner confidence, so that the people who come here were more ready to communicate with us, so that we didn't frighten them away immediately. So we could have a bit more positive attitude and confidence. But do we have a threat there, if anywhere? Well, the threat is that if we say that language is challenging, difficult, then we frighten these people away. If we give a positive signal to the student, then they are positive themselves. But if we give them more negative signals, then they get frightened. And then we could also do it this way, that if people come to Estonia, they learn in an Estonian-speaking language school, then they should be ready to study Estonian. If they come to a university in Estonia or to come to work in Estonia, they should be ready to take some courses. Jaak Juske, you now, after hearing all of this, what do you think? Is immigration a threat to Estonian language and culture? Of course, after all of it. First of all, hello to everybody. As a historian, as Tõnis Lukas is also a historian, we know that Estonia has been a multilingual and multinational country for a long time. And at the same time, Estonian language has related well to other languages. If it was a closed museum language, it would have got extinct a long time ago already. And I think we should be more glad about the position of Estonian language at the moment. In history, Estonian language has been very threatened at times. At the moment, we live in the Estonian Republic, and the position of Estonian language has never been more secure than at the moment. It's a digital language. It's one of the languages of the European Union. We should really value it more. Of course, it's a small language, and small languages are always vulnerable. And people have always been moving, migrating, dislocating. And I think this migration isn't a serious threat to Estonian language. But of course, if the people come here, our attitude to them will be important. Will we regard them as a suspicious gang of people with different skin color? Or could we provide them with good opportunities to study Estonian language free of charge and put their children into Estonian speaking in kindergartens and so on? So this is important. And this will have an impact on how fast these immigrants will obtain Estonian language and what the future will be looking like. Thank you. So I understand that there's not a big threat, but more like a challenge. And basically, if we translate our important novel into Ukrainian, we'll get good results.
But then there's the question, should we react as a country or state? And what should the state do in order to preserve the Estonian nation and culture? Well, we've been nominating Tammsaare for so many times, so I'll continue with it. Let's look at Tammsaare, the writer. Let's say our own young people who read Tammsaare. Well, frankly, I think there's a danger that they will move away from Estonia. They see how much work there is, how much trouble there is in Estonia. So perhaps we wouldn't have the immigration problem then if we had Ukrainians here. Well, we do not talk about Ukrainians. One nation is not worse or better than another. So I don't want to point out anyone particularly. But if we ask whether it's the state or citizens who should do something, we have this historic skill to cope. And I think as the citizens of a state, well, what we have written in constitutions, this is the agreement by the people. And it's the state that has written it down, and the people have to make it into reality. We have agreed that Estonian language is the national or state language. In the public institutions, everything is carried out in Estonian. Universities, they work in Estonian. However, they have started to carry out more things in English. All the ceremonies they're carrying out in English. So if we do not pay attention to these things and we're ready to speak another language, if there's another person among us who is from another nationality, just out of politeness, then in this case we cut off the possibilities to develop our own language. And people get used to it, and we have a society who speaks another language. That's why we have to be attentive and to keep to our agreements that we have so far. What should the country do? Well, we do something. I am part of an Estonian Teaching and Development Commission member in the Estonian Parliament, Riigikogu, and now for a half a year I have observed the situation of the Estonian language teaching and studying. The results are not great. There are issues in each area, but that's why we created this particular commission, and the aim is to have a practical value to these theoretical ideas. So that's our task, but the situation is not great. Dennis Lucas, you mentioned about not only about immigration, but you said something about the English language taking over. Yeah, if we listen to the previous speaker, it seems that this person or the administrator of the university, they have somehow betrayed our constitutional ideals. I think it's not so. One of the main values of and aims of our constitution is to preserve and develop the Estonian nation and culture. And if for that we need the scientists to speak in English among each other in order to carry out or to improve the science in Estonia and in order to improve the Estonian economy as a result, then I think it's worth it. We do have to take into account the purpose, the aim in itself. The aim is not only to speak in Estonian among each other. The aim is to keep and to develop the Estonian language and culture. If at some point we need the Estonian genetics or IT area to develop, to become the best in the world, if for that we need to have professors teaching in English, or for example, and people who cannot speak Estonian, I don't think it's I think we should do that. We should employ these people because we have to take into account the main aim. Of course, it's easy to go and ridicule things, but also during the Soviet era, during the Russian era, for us, I studied at the university, and it was obvious not to have any sources in Estonian for me for writing my thesis. It was normal to have sources in Latin, in other languages, so there is no problem. The fact that science is done in English, it's not a problem. The problem arises when we let English or another language take over our living environment. Then at some point we will stop translating, we will stop popularizing our own culture and cultural area, and this way, activity by activity, area by area, we start using another language. So we will have this language switch. We've seen this in history already, and considering this, we do have to keep alive the Estonian environment. We have to work for that. Otherwise, this process will continue, and in 10 years we will say, oh, look at that, no more Estonian. Maris Lauri, just wait a second, but who are these people who should... Yes, I'm asking you, not Maris Lauri. I'm asking who are these people who have to work for it? Well, all together. We should all work towards it. For example, translate into Estonian and from Estonian. Finance, translation for study books, for doctoral thesis, for translating the summaries of doctoral thesis. We should finance it. Of course, state with its politics, they can do a lot of things to preserve the language and culture. Maris Lauri. Before I mentioned about being confident that we should create these better opportunities at a grassroots level to have more people attracted to Estonia and Estonian. I think another place where the state should regulate, but in a softer way, at least that's what I prefer. For example, Chapter 37 of our constitution says that everyone has the right for studying in Estonian. Now we should look at whether everyone has this opportunity. I am from the Ida-Virumaa county as well, and I know that there is the situation where children go to the Estonian medium school and they are from families who speak Russian as a native language, and it's hard for them, and we don't have the resources to support them more. So they go to Russian schools, but then we don't pay attention to these schools where Russian native speaker students would like to go to and learn in Estonian. And then when we speak about new immigration and new immigrants, how do we motivate them to send their kids to the Estonian medium school and not to Russian medium school? In different countries there have been different solutions to that. We shouldn't force, but we should motivate somehow. Children from Russian-speaking families do not manage in Estonian schools. Yes, they cannot. Yes, because the curriculum is meant for people who come from Estonian-speaking families. Well, they do study still and cry. But those who do want to study, we shouldn't set obstacles in front of them. We should support them. If they do want to study in Estonian, we shouldn't stop them. Am I right? So as I understand, you want to change constitution. No, of course not. The constitution says that everyone has the right, but we should apply this paragraph of the constitution. Narva upper secondary school, Estonian upper secondary school in Narva. So let's give an example. The child goes to school, they take the constitution with them, they want to learn in Estonian. I know, yes, how do we guarantee that they can learn in Estonian according to or in their language? By the constitution, you cannot send them out of the door and tell them you cannot study here. We have to create special Estonian language courses so they could learn in Estonian. Of course, there are no other countries in the world of which the task is to preserve the Estonian culture. It's the task of Estonia. We've said many times that multilingualism is a richness, but Estonian or people living in Estonia, they should speak at a good level 3 local languages, Estonian, Russian and English. What concerns teaching Estonian as the state language to immigrants, then we should start at a very early age, from the kindergarten already. And I think teenagers or young adults who haven't learned Estonian or acquired, then Estonian and Russian youngsters should be learning together in one school, in one language, where they could help each other. I think Kohtla-Järve State Upper Secondary School is a very interesting experiment, a good example. My friend Hendrik Agur, who is the headmaster and with whom I've worked together for long, he has taken up a very difficult task, a very important mission. And I know that beginning has been very hard, but I think this is one of the solutions to help the Russian-speaking youngsters to learn Estonian. Thank you. As it was said previously, solution, dual-lingual school. This idea is supported by so many research projects. Why don't we work towards that? At the moment, I cannot be the member of the parliament because I'm too young, but there will be the time one day. Well, something is done, so I didn't say that nothing is done, but I'm just asking why we cannot create this dual language school. People seem to have a positive or relatively positive attitude. Well, this relatively positive attitude, I, as a resident from Narva, I can say that the world is changing, the world is multilingual, we can learn in whichever language. We should find this common or shared part from values. I think you said something which is right, and you mentioned the terms that are correct. We should not force If of course, we can talk about new immigrants, Ukrainians, British, Australian citizens, how they do in Estonia. We have to admit, actually, that the main question is how to make the local Russians to learn Estonian. If we want them to learn Estonian and speak Estonian, we have to make them, or us, make them want it. And the easiest way is to begin with not forcing, of eliminating the word must. And we have to make it so that people would like to learn themselves. I was happy to learn in a language immersion class when I was younger, and I remember how my parents spoke about it, how our teachers spoke about this study program, and still I remember it. How they discussed whether it will completely Estonian what one or another party suggests. We have to change this paradigm and somehow create this internal motivation for people. Well, this forcing, the concept of forcing is something that a friend of mine said in Narva. Well, we can discuss this Estonian Russian school a lot, and we have discussed it for the past 15, 20 years. But at the same time, universities are becoming English medium universities. And I saw that English curriculum at universities increases more and more, and there are more and more Estonian students who want to learn in English at the universities. Do you see a threat in here? Well, I wanted to mention to Daniel, first of all, that you shouldn't go to the parliament right away, otherwise you waste your life. First of all, do something, and then you can go there and you have something to give back to the nation and people. But when we speak about values, one of the values that Estonians understand, and what we expect from others as well, is a respect towards other cultures and nations. Take Estonians who have moved to Latvia, Sweden, or any other country. It's completely natural to integrate and learn the local language. Many of them do keep alive the Estonian language, but many just integrate into the new society and learn a new language. The value of appreciating the language of the area where I live. So we also ask others to respect the same things, to follow the same value. So we're not talking about democracy or any other things, that only this is value. There are also other values, for example, respecting other cultures. I understand your favorite topic is Estonian and Russian schools, but let's speak about universities, Dennis Lucas. Yeah, I can talk about universities. What should be the Estonian higher education strategy to balance somehow this use of foreign language, this increasing use of foreign languages? We should first of all keep to the agreements that we do have at the legislation level, at administrative agreements that have been adopted or signed by with the universities. It's said what kind of quota we have for foreign language curriculum, and that in every section there has to be at least one curriculum in Estonian. So the universities will receive funding from the state. But universities shift these borders all the time. They want to move towards using more English. There is, of course, financial pressure. I can admit that. But, for example, if we paid to the PhD students twice or 3 times more compared to now, and in some areas it's done, but then the professor will say, why are the PhD students paid more than me? So financing higher education is complicated, but we have to somehow do it at the levels that we can also keep alive. This is smaller curriculums. And I think it's very much about the attitude. Will it hurt us if we learn in English? No, it doesn't, but it just gives a signal to the next generation that Estonian is not important, and we will lose the terminology and vocabulary for these areas or topics. So we should lose this requirement for master studies that to open a curriculum there must be at least 10 university students, because especially these curriculums regarding the culture or nationalities, they're very small. There are very small groups learning them there, and they must close these areas completely. So financing is one thing, but then also keeping or following the requirements is another story. And if we agree that the curriculums carried out in Estonian are paid from the state or paid by the state, and the English-speaking curriculums are paid by the students, then now the situation has changed, and now the state also finances university curriculums created in English for English medium learning. And I don't think we should allow something that is done somewhere already, that basically everything is taught in English, although they not say that it's Estonian medium curriculum. So we should change the attitude, because it's a big value to keep Estonian higher education.
Right now, the question is about why it all came about. One of the reasons was that we had a changeover to Estonian medium free of charge higher education. This meant that that they had less extra incomes and they had to invent something. Now we should maybe look at the system and discuss how to solve the problem. If there's enough whether there's motivation or not, we can fight about it. But if the conditions will be still valid, then believe me, the universities will find solutions and English will start to dominate more. There's another aspect. We should consider if we could have a curriculum that was bilingual or mixed languages curriculum, that foreign professor, for example, would do his courses in English or German, and the rest would be in Estonian. But it's very often that one course, that the whole program is done, is turned into English. We want academic sphere to be flexible. It's also that environment prepares the youths to get by in academic world. I didn't understand. Are you happy that English medium programs, the number of it is growing? No, I don't like it. But in order to keep the process normal, so that we avoided having just Estonian language or English language curriculums, then that would enforce English dominance. We want the system to be more flexible and not to lose Estonian that much in the academic field. Then we need to add more flexibility. Now, Vladimir. Speaking about language and culture, we are representatives of a small nation and try to preserve these things. Then it's very easy to get alarmed and start to think, we have somebody who doesn't value language and culture, somebody who doesn't regard them as important. I dare to say that if we were to ask the employees of most of Estonian universities if Estonian higher education should be preserved, they would say, yes, we think it's valuable. I think we should rather ask, why are universities why do they play around this language system? They do it to get more funding, so they turn more to English. And I agree here with Maris Lauri. It's about funding of higher education. It's not about its attitude to Estonian. It's about how to make it happen that universities didn't have to use that much English. I have an idea as well. Anna Markina, one of my former students from the University of Tartu, once proposed an idea. And she said that once we had the changeover to free of charge Estonian higher education, we took a good step towards lifelong quality learning, because a lot of people who already have higher education often return to the university. I must say that my partner is one of them, and I'm very glad about it. And it's that these same students use this funding allocated to university for primary higher education, bachelor's and master's degrees. They use the system in a good way, the students. But we should think about how to limit the accessibility of free higher education, to just limit it to one time, that you cannot do this free of charge higher education 2 or 3 times. But if we see that if we start to use this funding for lifelong learning, this might not be the most sustainable option. Next person, please. Speaking about higher education being free of charge, this has brought about serious problems. Now, looking at the number of Estonian language teachers coming from universities, these numbers are very, very low. In Tallinn University, there are 3 graduates of Estonian language teachers, so very small number. So people turn to business studies instead, different kinds of things. So we have a lack of some specialists in some fields. So there's this problem, and there's another issue that was already mentioned, and this is the insecurity of Estonians, our submissiveness. If there's a big group where majority are Estonians and there's 2 English-speaking people, then they will take over English. Of course, there are groups and professions where English is the working language. But it's sometimes in Tartu that if you have a group there, we could speak Estonian, but we choose English instead. Jaak Juske. One of the problems is that I've communicated with a lot of Estonian language teachers. The skills of Estonian language in our youths has really fallen dramatically. The curriculums face a lot of pressure. There are lots of different content, and the number of Estonian lessons has fallen. And as a result, Estonian language skills have fallen. So youths cannot speak that very well. So we should increase the number of Estonian language lessons. But I very much like the topic of value space. So this value space helps to integrate people, and one of the important parts of it is that when Estonian Republic was created 100 years ago, then it decided to guarantee minority groups cultural autonomy. And this has also been instilled in our constitution. And one of the aspects here is that these local ethnic minorities also need to respect Estonian culture and language. But we as a majority language also need to respect them as minority cultures. And help them to also develop their cultures. Indeed, without doubt, we do it, and I think we are doing it at a good level. That the general attitude here is that if the other groups also respect our rules, they can keep their roots and culture. The problem isn't about the willingness of our people to have a changeover to another language. It's not that. The problem is here because the same people who come here, who move here, they think they move into a normal country where they will be asked to learn the local language, but their motivation immediately falls if we start to use their language. They won't be supported. They won't have opportunity to practice. Their language will be used instead, and they will also take it for granted that their language will be used as the language of discussion. A lot has been talked about financing, but it's not the only reason why we are changing the language. Because once we were speaking, we are we're a poor country, we have poor universities, and that's why we cannot attract good professors here, English-speaking professors. So we need to do our things in our own local language. We don't have good enough salaries. Now we are saying the same thing. We have little money, but now there are more people coming here, and we have a lot of foreign professors coming here. It's not about money, it's also about attitude. I think with foreign professors, they also had requirements about the language skills they would need to possess in Estonian language. Yes, in universities, public universities, the employees should be able to speak Estonian. I'm not sure about the language skills level they should have, but if they are here lecturers here, it also depends on their roles as a lecturer. But it shouldn't be that simple meetings should have to be held in English because of him. Whether it's A1, A2, B1, if a professor comes here with a long-term contract, he or she should take an obligation and learn the Estonian language to some extent. So that's a reasonable requirement. So now if we were to put together a strategy of Estonian higher education, so one thought, one education at a time, you said that not to have a changeover to a foreign language. What would be the proposals? All these things can be topics. For example, the clause that you can study free of charge one time, or how you could get the scholarship. These are details in some way. But in general, Estonian language higher education should be accessible, because if we lose master's degree Estonian education, then we'll lose the bachelor's degree in Estonian, and then the parents will be asking, why should our children get prepared for an English medium university in an Estonian medium upper secondary school? So it would lead to this kind of domino effect. But in general, we are similar to other countries. But nobody of you proposed that let's teach Estonian to foreign students. It's actually a requirement in contracts that foreign students should have the possibility to learn, take at least 6 European credit points at the university. So they should have the option of that, and that's completely understandable, I think.
Jaak, should the Estonian universities and higher education schools teach Estonian to foreigners? For example, in Narva College, IT students are taught Estonian for a year. Yes, I think it should be so, but I think we have got stuck with the higher education topic. I think the same importance has, or even more importance has, the fact that learning Estonian should start from the kindergarten, and we have to improve the skill of Estonian among Estonian and Russian-speaking youngsters. That's where we create the basis for preserving Estonian language. Now, responding to your specific question, I think for sure we have to give them the possibility and make it attractive to foreign students. However, I have a feeling that these foreign students learn what is the culture in Estonia and the Estonian language, not during the lectures, but during the time they spend out of university, mainly in the old town or in their campuses. So I think it's completely normal as well. And through this communication, they should have the interest to learn Estonian. Maris Lauri, I think that in a way the basic study of Estonian should be elementary, should be part of the course. We can of course say that maybe they will be interested, maybe they will suddenly have contact with Estonian language. But in many cases, we have foreign language speaking students taking their courses They manage also without learning Estonian. They manage with communicating with others. But if we do give the opportunity, even just for saying tere or hello in Estonian, or to read the menu in the diner or in the canteen, then this gives the opportunity to create the first contact. Because right now, there might not even be the first contact opportunity. I think the first contact doesn't have to be long-term or long contact or really deep Estonian language study, but it should be an introduction even. I know that they do that in Denmark. Everyone who goes to study in Denmark, they receive this basic course of Danish, so they would be able to understand the elementary things. For example, the sign on the door, if they write saying go in or exit. There's also a positive example. I've heard that in the Narva College, youth or youngsters who come from Russia take a course to learn Estonian for a year and they acquire it very well. Should other students do it as well? Why do we need foreign students? Should we need them for universities to be financially well off? Or should we look at receiving the best students? Historically, academics have always moved around the world. It creates more knowledge, experience, expands the horizon. We like our students go abroad, and it's also good if there are people coming to study here in Estonia. Even if this student graduates, or even if they only learn or study here for a year or 2 years, then once they return to their home country, they will be Estonian ambassadors, we could say, because they have experience from this country and they can tell them about Estonia. They can tell them what is Estonia. In the Belarusian university, there are 1/3 of Chinese students. I don't know in which language they study, but they know 3 words in Russian after they graduate and then they'll go back to China. Whose ambassadors are they? They clearly go there to acquire higher education, but I think we should see them as our future ambassadors. And for that, we need them to have a contact with our society, and it's easier to get it through the language. Of course, you can do it in foreign language as well. But I do think that even with the minimum level of Estonian, it's easier than not having anything at all. I'm glad to say that the discussion has come back to the point where we began. The migration taking place now is actually an opportunity for us that we should take advantage of much more. And if we speak more specifically, we do have to admit honestly to ourselves that there could be 2 types of foreign students. One is the one coming here for a year or 2 years for master studies in Tallinn University or Tartu University. And another kind of foreign students is the one who come here for half a year through Erasmus program. We shouldn't pretend that they come here to really do some serious science. This is just experience they gain. And when we speak about those who come here for long term, we should focus on them. People who have a long-term experience in Estonia, who receive higher education in Estonia, we should ask ourselves, could we take an additional step to give them additional reason to stay here? On the one hand, it is a possibility to learn about a culture, to learn the language. At the same time, we do need something to make them think about remaining to Estonia. Vladimir, should we pay for their Estonian language courses? Well, a minimum level, sure, for sure. And we should support it. And we should also support the fact that they could invest money and their time into educating themselves. We have 7 minutes left. Who would like to ask questions? Microphones to those who would like to ask questions. Please also tell your name and to whom the question is asked from. My name is Trine and I have a general question and some comments. First of all, Jan Juske, you have misunderstood the history. The Estonian Republic, when it was re-established, we didn't apply the international convention saying that illegal immigrants should leave from the country. In Baltic states, everyone stayed here. So saying that we restated our independence, we had cultural independence, I think you are not up to date with the historical conventions. But I have a question to Tõnis Lukas. I would like to say that the argument the Estonians have integrated everyone and everything. You know that before the occupation we had 5% of Baltic Germans here and a couple of percentage of Russians, mostly in an area called Petserimaa. So actually Estonia is one of the only countries in Estonia with Latvian where we have the smallest population of native speakers in a country, Estonian native speakers, and Tallinn together with Riga have the same issue. We have a very small population of Estonian native speakers. And what concerns Daniel, who is a very young person still, perhaps you would like to update yourself about how Finno-Ugri nationalities, according to your model, being integrated. They've basically died out. You got to speak a lot, and since this conference is very one-sided, it's not at all balanced. There are no balanced opinions. I would like to finish my thought, first of all. Daniel, the youngster, said that we should have this kind of training at the Estonian and Russian schools, or the schools speaking both Estonian and Russian. First of all, I would like to say this is discriminating Estonian children. Why should an Estonian child learn in Russian? It's an international conference, and in Europe, children do not speak Russian. They learn in Germany, in Sweden, in Italy, France. They learn the language of the country, whichever country in Europe. They don't learn Russian at high school. Vladimir, would you like to say why should Estonian children learn Russian? I think I had another criticism addressed to me. Let's look at what Russia does. To be honest, I don't care what Russia does as a state. I am not born in Russia. I'm born in Estonia. I'm an Estonian citizen. And my interest is to have Estonia take as an example the best practices in the world, to learn from its mistakes, and to learn based on best practices from the world and not from cruelties taking place in other areas. So why should Estonian children learn in Russian? No, I don't think they should. As a Russian-speaking person, I think it's okay if Estonian youngsters don't learn Russian and they cannot compete with me so well at the labor market. And that's why we shouldn't talk about the word must or forced studying. We should talk about the fact that people should want to learn this language and how could we support it. Yeah, I'd like to say that it was an interesting point saying that we discriminate Estonians. We speak about dual language schools. I'm not saying that Estonians have to start learning in Estonian. When we speak about this kind of school model, we are not saying that they should learn in Russian. There should be a possibility to have this choice, as Vladimir said. Tõnis Lukas, dual language school is dual language when both languages are equally used, because using the language is the basis for language staying alive. So it's clear that if there are no more Estonians in the school, the communication language will be Russian, and what's done in the lessons is not sufficient to call it an Estonian school. So with this model there are problems, but I would just like to say that of course integration in Estonia has issues. Yesterday I spoke about cultural issues, that some Estonian citizens have not understood where they are, but I said that Estonia has a long-term experience. I didn't say that the experience is only positive. And to sum up, when we speak about internationalization, I'm not against it. I would like to pay the attention to the fact that some years ago there was we could have seen this internationalization in Estonian university. The only exception was that Finnish students coming here learned veterinary sciences and medical sciences in Estonian, but now they do it in English. And, for example, a doctor from Stefani learned very well Estonian, and their children now learned Estonian. Urmas Estenberg, yes, to sum up, someone mentioned that there is no interest towards Estonian language by Russians. There is interest. We should just guarantee them the possibility to learn it. And to sum up the discussion, the danger is to Estonian language. The threat is there, but we should make sure that the number of people immigrating here would be optimal, and we could integrate them. Yes, I wanted to say that I said that Estonian Republic, when it was restored, it re-established the cultural autonomy, and people who have come back are our people. People who have decided to stay here are our people. And now the time is off, but Daniel, you can say a couple of words. Yes, I just say to Tõnis that just wanted to oppose Tõnis saying that dual language school, well, thank you. You can continue your debate in the corridors. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our politicians.